Please welcome Andrew Ross Sorkin and his guest, the founder and CEO of Nvidia, Jensen Huang.
Welcome back, everybody. Jensen is here, of course, the CEO of Nvidia. As I mentioned at the top of the day, this is the clear winner of every winner in the world of artificial intelligence thus far. His company powers everything from OpenAI, Google's programs, Meta. They're all frenemies in some ways. We'll talk about it. He founded the company back in 1993 over breakfast at Denny's with two friends. Since then, as CEO, he's led Nvidia to become the world's most valuable semiconductor company. Nvidia's stock has been on a tear, up 240%.
Nvidia is the most valuable company in the world, surpassing Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and even Google. This is the company powering every tech company you could think of, from overseeing the gaming industry to AI revolution, robotics, and self-driving cars. A company that nearly went bankrupt with only 30 days cash left to survive. But how did this company grow to become the biggest company in history, with a market capitalization of $4 trillion? This is the insane true story of Nvidia and the CEO that powers technology. Nvidia was founded in 1993 by three electrical engineers, Jensen, Huang, Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Prem, with Jensen assigned as CEO. Jensen was born in Taiwan in 1963. His father worked as a chemical engineer at an oil refinery, while his mother was a teacher. The family often relocated. At just 5 years old, Jensen's family moved to Thailand. But because of the ongoing Vietnam War, they migrated to the United States and finally decided they would live there. Basically, he was a Taiwanese-American immigrant. Jensen's mother played a crucial role in developing his English skills. Each day, she would pick 10 random words from dictionary to teach him, and this boosted his learning ability dramatically. When Jensen was 10 years old, his parents sent him to live with his elder brother in a reform boarding school. There, each student was expected to work every day at a nearby tobacco farm, but his age and size didn't allow him. Jensen was too young to attend classes at the Reform Academy, so instead he was educated at a separate public school. His childhood was difficult to say the least. He was frequently bullied and even threatened with knives. However, when his family found out about this situation, they quickly pulled him out of school. But luckily for Jensen, he managed to secure a better education. At the age of 16, he graduated from Aloha High School and went on to study electrical engineering and computer science at Oregon State University. Jensen got his first job working as a waiter at the local Denny's restaurant. During his free time, Jensen would frequently clean toilets, and this made his boss admire him. However, Jensen wasn't satisfied with this life. Jensen wanted something better, and he was obsessed with a new technology that was just coming up: video games. Though people didn't take them too serious. He also got a job at AMD, a microprocessor company, where he designed AMD microprocessors while simultaneously attending Stanford. However, when he heard of a new chip's design processes at LSI Logic, Jensen reportedly left AMD to assume a role at LSI. It was through LSI work with Sun Microsystems that Jensen met Chris Malachowski and Curtis Prem. The three quickly discovered that they shared same passion for technology and a vision of how graphics could transform computing. They often discussed how video games were one of the most computing demanding problems and also a market with huge potentials. These conversations laid the foundation for building their company to focus on graphics-based processing. They met for dinner at Denny's restaurant where Jensen once worked. and seriously discussed how they were going to start a company. They envisioned graphics-based processing as the best strategy for tackling challenges surrounding general-purpose computing. But here's the catch. They argued over who would quit his job first. But Prem decided to quit first, which put pressures on Jensen and Chris not to leave him alone. So they both decided to quit their respective jobs to join him. They initially named the company Envision, but that name was already taken by a manufacturer of toilet papers. Jensen then suggested they should name the company Nvidia, which came from a Latin word Nvidia. The NV stands for Next Vision because they believed on the products they were going to make, and the green in their logo meant they wanted competitors to turn green with envy. Jensen remained in good standing with LSI despite quitting his job and was able to secure funding for Nvidia from LSI CEO Wilfred Corrigan, who introduced Jensen to venture capitalist Don Valentine. Valentine was the leader of Sequoia Capital. This funding enabled Nvidia to begin development efforts towards its first chip. By the first day of operation, Jensen was made Nvidia's president and CEO. Even though Jensen was 30, he was much younger than both Prem and Malachowski. They believed he was prepared to be CEO, and they eventually received $20 million in funding from Don Valentine. With the investment from Sequoia Capital, they were fully prepared to start their own company, but eventually they were going to face a battle in their early years. The first computers to be released were expensive and primarily used by governments and large corporations for complex calculations. But the invention of microprocessor, a processor on a single chip, changed everything. This breakthrough led to the creation of smaller and much more affordable PCs and laptops. Demand surged in the early 1990s and personal computing started becoming a regular thing in our homes, offices, and schools. In 1997, around 48,000 personal computers were shipped globally, but by 2001, annual shipments had skyrocketed to 125 million units, and the amount continued to grow. While many companies like Intel and AMD focused on central processing units or CPUs, Nvidia spotted a huge market gap in GPUs or graphics processing units. At the time, GPUs was a niche market and people didn't see it too important. Meanwhile, IBM was dominating the PCs market back in the mid-90s, which led to the creation of IBM clone PCs, and they quickly became the industry standard. The release of Microsoft Windows 3.0 in 1990 and Windows 3.1 in 1992 fueled the explosive growth, making PCs more user-friendly. This was also the time when video games were becoming mainstream. The gaming industry had its roots in the 1950s, but the real consumer gaming push began with the Magnavox Odyssey, released in 1972. And this was the first home console, followed by arcade hits like Computer Space and Pong. Pong's popularity sparkled a flood of copycat games. It became oversaturated and poor quality, which led to infamous video game crash of 1983. But it also opened a door for new generation of companies like 3DFX and Nvidia. By the late 1990s, Nvidia was one of nearly 70 startups racing to build graphics accelerators for gaming. But this was a step too far. People didn't show much interest in games since the first market crash, so their success would depend on bold decisions. But Jensen made one of the most risky decisions in Nvidia's history. He believed immersive graphics-heavy games would push the limits of computing, and GPUs would be the future. Their first big opportunity came from Sega, which was preparing its new Sega Saturn console to compete with Sony PlayStation, who was already at the top of the game. Sega struck a deal with Nvidia to design a custom graphics chips for their new gaming consoles. For Nvidia, this looked like a breakthrough, but it later turned out to be a nightmare. You see, Nvidia's first product, the NV1, which was the custom chips for Sega, was released in 1995, and it used quadrilateral primitives, while the industry standard was triangle primitives. Nvidia bet on a different vision of 3D, which destroyed the NV1. When Microsoft introduced DirectX, a graphics API intended to unify PC game development, which became the official primitives of Direct3D and games. The chips Nvidia built for Sega console was roughly 250,000 units. Over 249,000 units were returned due to poor sales. You see, Sega also contributed to the slowdown. They were constantly shifting specifications, so Nvidia had to work under Sega's instruction. And at this point, Nvidia had already poured their time, energy, and resources building these chips, only to end up losing the market. The project pushed Nvidia to the verge of bankruptcy. By late 1995, Nvidia only had just 30 days of cash left. However, despite the failed project, Sega's CEO Soichiro still decided to invest $5 million to keep the company. Jensen still refused to give up. He pushed his team to develop a new chip called the River 128, which launched in 1997. It was a massive success for Nvidia. During its first month of launching, they sold over 1 million units. This quickly followed up with the River TNT, which placed Nvidia on a higher ground. By 1999, Nvidia got public and they listed on Nasdaq for $12 per share. People who invested on Nvidia stock during this time saw their profits tripled more than 300 times. That same year, they released the GeForce 256, the first chip officially marketed as a graphics processing unit. It was the first fully direct 3D accelerator, and it delivered a huge leap in 3D game performance. Nvidia was no longer a struggling startup, they were a rising industry leader. However, one of their biggest competitors was 3DFS Interactive. You see, back in the mid-1990s, 3DFS was winning with their Voodoo cards. But the problem was, Voodoo cards only handled 3D, which requires gamers to buy a separate 2D card. But Nvidia found a solution. The River graphics card and GeForce offered all-in-one 2D plus 3D capability. Most importantly, Nvidia aligned itself with industry standards. They work with both Direct3D and OpenGL. While 3DFS relied on their API glide, over time 3DFS fell behind after facing countless lawsuits and financial crises. On December 15, 2000, Nvidia announced it would acquire most of 3DFS assets for $70 million in cash and stock. This included 3DFS patents, brand names like Voodoo and Engineers, along with its multi-chip scan line. Overnight, Nvidia has eliminated its biggest rival. Under Jensen leadership, Nvidia captured nearly 90% of the discrete GPU market. The partnership with Microsoft also boosted their dominance. Nvidia provided the GPU for the first Microsoft Xbox, earning a $200 million in advance, although the project diverted many engineers from other tasks. In December 2004, Sony announced a deal with Nvidia to design the RxOx Reality Synthesizer GPU for the PlayStation 3. Nvidia earned hundreds of millions through upfront licensing and per unit royalties. The bigger problem was its high cost. The PS3 launched at $600, partly due to the RxX expenses. Sony later switched to AMD for the PlayStation 4 and 5, which gave AMD a much higher ground to rival Nvidia. But here's the catch. The ROX SD was no failure. It gave Nvidia more visibility and the resources to keep pushing forward in the GPU wars against AMD and ATI. But the battle ahead was far more dangerous than Nvidia could think of, and this would threaten everything Nvidia has been building its entire life. In 2010, the ImageNet project was created, a massive database of labeled images to help the computer learn visual recognition. By 2012, 3 researchers entered a competition with deep learning models like AlexNet, which contained 60 million parameters and 650,000 neurons. It was too heavy for CPUs to train. Instead, they used 2 Nvidia GTX 580 GPUs, each with 3 GB of memories. Together, they trained on 1.2 million images, about 27 GB of data stored in JPEG formats. The result, AlexNet ended up crushing the competition. It was the breakthrough moment that proved GPUs were the future of artificial intelligence. This success set off chain reaction. By 2015, OpenAI was focused to push artificial intelligence forward. Big tech companies like Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Amazon all jumped into AI, pouring billions into research. Microsoft alone invested $13 billion into OpenAI. But behind the scenes, all of these companies had something in common. They all needed Nvidia's GPUs to power their AI infrastructure. Fast forward to late 2022, when ChatGPT was released, it ran on thousands of Nvidia's GPUs, and its explosive popularity triggered the global AI boom. The demand for Nvidia H100 Hopper GPUs skyrocketed. They became the most sought-after chips in the world. Nvidia's stock surged. By mid-2023, the company passed $1 trillion in market value, making it the first chip company in history to hit $1 trillion market cap. By 2024, Nvidia's valuation had more than quadrupled, with Jensen Huang's net worth climbing into top ranks of global billionaires. Nvidia was expanding into different markets: self-driving cars with Nvidia Drive, healthcare for drugs discovery and medical imaging, and supercomputing with DGX system powering labs and governments. From bankruptcy in the 90s to $4 trillion, becoming the most valuable company in the world, supplying the infrastructure for the entire AI era. Jensen Huang still remained the same CEO since day one. He turned Nvidia into the engine behind how the world builds, plays, and thinks. He's now worth over $150 billion, and this is just the beginning.